One bullet, the whole world against me. Imagine you're the underestimated cadet, standing among generals and special forces, all waiting for you to fail. Emily Carter grips the Barrett, heavy as fate itself, aiming at a target so distant most believe it's impossible. Then, the rifle roars, and the metallic ping echoes from 2,000 meters away. That sound changes her life forever. From that moment, she's no longer just a cadet. She becomes a symbol and a target. Every eye is on her. Envy, admiration, hatred. And as the secrets of her grandfather, a lost legend, slowly unravel, Emily must answer the only question that matters. Did that shot unlock glory or a sweet death sentence? The sun poured down on Granite Ridge like a giant furnace, igniting swirls of red dust in the wind. On the long firing range, rows of steel targets stood silent, reflecting sunlight so bright it stung the eyes. The air was thick with anticipation and tension. The annual shooting competition, where the finest marksmen were tested before military dignitaries, generals, and powerful figures from the Pentagon. For hours, shots rang out one after another, tearing through the air only to vanish into nothingness. 6 shooters, all battle-hardened veterans, failed in turn. At 2,000 meters, the steel target stood unmoved, as if mocking every effort. Whispers rippled through the stands. Unpredictable swirling winds, heat distorting the sightline. And perhaps this challenge was designed for no one to succeed. Emily Carter stood among the cadets, her uniform soaked with sweat. At 23, she was too young to belong in this arena, where experience and rank were believed to dictate outcomes. But when Colonel Shaw's gaze swept over the crowd and locked onto her, Emily felt her heart pound like a war drum. He said nothing, only gave a slight nod. That nod opened a door she'd never dared imagine stepping through. Major Kincaid, the officer overseeing the demonstration, frowned the moment Emily approached the Barrett M82A1. A cadet among master marksmen? The training ground buzzed with a wave of murmurs, half mocking, half skeptical. Emily felt the weight of every stare on her shoulders, but her hands remained steady as she pulled the heavy rifle into position. The Barrett lay there like a slab of cold steel, but to Emily, it felt like an unplayed symphony. She took a deep breath, the wind whistling in her ears like a countdown drum. In her memory, her grandfather's words echoed, "No one truly controls the bullet. You just talk to it, then let it go at the right moment." She pressed her cheek to the stock, eyes narrowing for a heartbeat before opening, peering through the scope. It wasn't just a steel target in the distance. It was a fortress of prejudice, rank, and whispers that a young female cadet could never measure up. The glaring light warped the trajectory. The wind shifted every second, but Emily didn't count or calculate. She listened to her body, seeking stillness in each breath. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared, recoiling like a wild beast. In that moment, the world went silent, leaving only the invisible bullet streaking across a mile of open air. Then, the sound came, a sharp ping from the distant steel. That sound shattered the thick atmosphere, echoing across the range like a bell of reckoning. A deathly silence followed. Then the stands erupted in gasps of astonishment. People leapt to their feet, pointing, chattering. No one could believe it. A perfect shot at a distance where even the most seasoned marksman had fallen. Emily remained prone, cheek pressed to the stock, sighting one more time as if to confirm she wasn't dreaming. When she lifted her head, her eyes met Colonel Shaw's. He smiled, a rare smile reserved for those who'd witnessed the extraordinary. But in that crowd, Major Kincaid's eyes held no warmth. He stood rigid, jaw clenched, fists tight. To him, Emily hadn't just proven herself, she'd challenged a long-established order. That wasn't just a shot, it was an explosion aimed straight at authority. Emily stood, taking a long breath. But before she could fully savor the victory, a backlash surged. The applause mixed with murmurs. Just luck. One shot doesn't mean anything. Who does this girl think she is? The audience split in two, admiration laced with contempt. Kincaid approached, his boots pounding the sand like a relentless drum. His face cold as steel, he stared straight at Emily and growled softly, "Tomorrow. 0800. My office." Emily held his gaze, unflinching. Deep down, she knew. That bullet hadn't just pierced the target, it had breached a dangerous line. Beyond that line wasn't a shooting competition anymore. It was a war with the system, with prejudice, and with men far more powerful than her. The evening after that historic shot, the air at Granite Ridge grew heavy, like the sky before a storm. The usually lively mess hall fell eerily quiet when Emily walked in. The clatter of spoons and forks softened. The usual laughter faded, replaced by a barrage of stares. Some looked with admiration, but most carried doubt, even envy. Emily sat at an empty table, feeling an invisible barrier around her. She didn't need words to know. To many, her noon shot wasn't a triumph but an insult to the hierarchy. A cadet outshining veterans? That was defiance, not achievement. Only one person broke the silence. Cadet Nico Ramirez, a second year, quietly pulled up a chair beside her. No words, just a nod. Enough to tell Emily she wasn't entirely alone. That small presence became a fragile shield, making the meal less suffocating. But deep down, she knew the undercurrent was still rising. That night, Emily returned to her dorm late. The cold white neon light cast her shadow on the long wall, her footsteps echoing like they came from an endless corridor. She opened her drawer and pulled out an old, tarnished dog tag. The only remnant of her grandfather, Samuel Carter. She recalled childhood mornings in rural Texas, when he'd take her to an empty field, place an old rifle in her hands, and teach her to listen to the wind like it was the earth's breath. "Let your heartbeat sink with the wind," he'd said. Emily clutched the dog tag, closing her eyes to find calm. But Major Kincaid's image loomed like a dark shadow. His cold stare, the 0800 meeting, it wasn't a meeting, but a verdict waiting to be delivered. The next morning, dawn painted the range in soft orange. As was her habit, Emily went to the memorial garden, a small plot honoring fallen soldiers. There, she found Colonel Shaw standing, hand on a stone marker, silent as if speaking to lost souls. When he turned and saw Emily, his eyes softened. "Your grandfather saved my life in Southeast Asia," Shaw said quietly, his voice low like an echo from the past. "He wasn't just a sharpshooter. He was a man who saw beyond the rifle. He taught me that the first shot doesn't just kill an enemy, it can save a comrade, if you shoot for the right purpose." Emily stood still. For the first time, she heard someone in the ranks speak of her grandfather not just as a title, but with personal gratitude. But Shaw also issued a warning. "Kincaid doesn't forgive easily. You've wounded his pride in front of his superiors. Brace yourself. Because the next test isn't to evaluate you, it's to crush you." Emily's heart tightened. She felt it clearly. She was entering an uneven fight. On one side was her, a novice cadet, with only skill and a quiet legacy. On the other was a senior officer with power, wounded pride, and the system behind him. When the clock struck 8, Emily knocked on Major Kincaid's office door. Inside, the spacious room was steeped in the coldness of authority. Light streamed through the window, glinting off a polished wooden desk. Kincaid sat there, arms crossed, his gaze sharp as a blade. On the desk before him wasn't a rifle, but a list of challenges. 5 different firearms, 5 distances, 5 shooting conditions. No prior preparation, no time to calculate. One small mistake could shatter the fragile reputation Emily had just earned. Kincaid slid the list toward her, his voice low but heavy enough to weigh down the room. "Carter, if you think yesterday's shot wasn't luck, prove it. 5 rifles, 5 targets, 1 miss, and everyone will see the truth." Emily stood tall, clutching the dog tag in her pocket, her heart pounding. In that moment, she understood. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a battle for survival, to prove that yesterday's shot wasn't a stray spark, but the start of a journey. That morning, the southern Granite Ridge Range blazed under harsh sunlight. A heavy atmosphere hung over it, as if the entire base knew. Major Kincaid had set an impossible test for Emily Carter. Rows of soldiers and cadets formed a circle, none wanting to miss the moment a bold cadet was brought down after daring to challenge the order. On the sandy field, 5 rifles were neatly aligned: M4 carbine, M2010 ESR, SR-25 M14 EBR, and the familiar Barrett M82A1. Each rifle posed a different question, and one stumble from Emily would let mocking laughter drown out all prior applause. Emily stepped forward, her boots sinking into the scorching sand. Her heart beat like a war drum, but her eyes didn't waver. In her pocket, her grandfather's dog tag lay still, cold but steady. She heard his voice in her memory. "Don't shoot the bullet, let it go. When you control your breath, the bullet will find its mark." The first rifle, M4 carbine, 5.56 millimeters, 300 meters. Wind whipped sideways, the target's small steel plates barely rising above the sand. Emily lowered herself, aimed quickly, and fired. A crisp ping rang out. The second shot, the third, all hit dead center. The crowd murmured, a few whistles rising. But Kincaid stood still, his face like stone. The second rifle, M2010 ESR, 300 Winchester Magnum, 800 meters. This wasn't about speed anymore, but patience. The blazing sun and shimmering air distorted the range like a mirage. Emily lay flat, eyes fixed through the scope. She adjusted the sight meticulously, breathed deeply, and fired. The bullet tore through the air, and after a few heartbeats, ping. The steel sang again. The third rifle, SR-25, 7.62 millimeters, 1,100 meters. Moving target, swirling wind. This was the real test. Emily tracked the target as it emerged among the grass. She didn't calculate its steps, but let instinct guide her. The shot fired, the target fell. A cheer rose from the stands, louder now, no longer hiding surprise. The fourth rifle, M14 EBR, 600 meters, lateral moving target. A heavy rifle, strong recoil, easy to throw off aim. Emily adjusted her stance, held her breath, and fired. The bullet hissed, and the target toppled. The fourth ping echoed, tearing through the surrounding doubt. Finally, the fifth rifle, Barrett M82A1, 1,800 meters, artificial wind blowing chaotically. This was the clincher, Kincaid's trap. High-powered fans near the range created unnatural gusts. Even the most experienced shooters would struggle to calculate it. Kincaid stood with arms crossed, a smug smile curling his lips. Emily lay down, her hand gliding along the rifle like greeting an old friend. She didn't fight the swirling wind but listened to it, letting her heartbeat sink with its gusts. She adjusted the scope slightly, breathed deeply, and fired. The rifle roared, the stock slamming her shoulder, and the bullet vanished into the void. Time seemed to freeze. Then ping. The steel target sang, clear and decisive, defying the treacherous winds. The stands erupted, shouts and applause thundered. A young cadet had completed all 5 challenges in conditions that would break anyone. Emily sat up, sweat soaking her brow, but her eyes blazed like an unquenchable fire. Colonel Shaw stepped out from the stands, his face lit with a rare proud smile. But across from him, Major Kincaid didn't smile. He clenched his jaw, eyes burning with fury. To him, this defeat wasn't just personal. It shattered a core principle of the system, rank over talent. The crowd still chanted Emily's name, but she knew this wasn't the final victory. It was only the beginning. Another shot piercing the order, and on the other side of that line, greater, more dangerous forces awaited. After the 5-rifle challenge, Emily Carter's name spread through Granite Ridge like a spark tossed into dry straw. But fire doesn't just bring light, it also burns. At first, the looks she received held awe, tinged with respect. But within days, admiration turned to envy, then to resentment. In the mess hall, whispers grew sharp. Just a lucky streak. She's got someone backing her. The military's no place for kids playing superhero. Emily heard it all but never responded. Each rumor, each sneer, was like an invisible bullet aimed at her pride. Then, the wall of silence crumbled. One morning, Emily entered the range and saw personal photos of herself plastered across the bulletin board. Pictures from her private file, emails, even handwritten notes meant only for family. Someone had leaked them, scattering them like a weapon. The murmurs rose, and the stares boring into her were no longer just skeptical, they were raw mockery. Emily stood frozen, cold sweat running down her spine. Her heart tightened, not from humiliation but from the realization. Someone in the shadows wanted to crush her, piece by piece. In that moment, her grandfather's old saying echoed, "When you're surrounded, don't shoot wildly. Pick the real target, and be patient." Instead of reacting, Emily silently tore down the papers, crumpled them, and tossed them into the trash. Not a word. She knew silence now wasn't weakness, it was the only way to avoid falling into a hidden trap. That night, when everyone was asleep, Emily slipped out of the dorm, rifle in hand, to an abandoned corner of the old range. No lights, only the wind whistling through dry grass. She lay on the ground, aiming at distant shadows, letting her breath flow with each shot. The ping of steel echoed sporadically in the dark. No audience, no eyes, just her and the rifle. Only here could Emily find her rhythm of peace. But she wasn't as alone as she thought. A figure stepped out from the darkness, Colonel Shaw. He stood silently for a moment, then handed her a small key. "Range 12, he said curtly. "No cameras, no official schedule. 2 hours every night are yours. Don't waste them." Emily gripped the key, feeling an invisible thread connecting her to him. No words were needed. That trust was stronger than all the scornful looks of the day. Time passed, and she trained in the dark, each shot like a heartbeat. Rumors still spread, mocking glances lingered. But deep inside, Emily knew she was walking a path most couldn't see. Then one afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the barracks, Emily received an email. Her heart pounded as she opened it. The Department of Defense logo, General Harper's signature. "Cadet Carter, you are invited to the sniper exhibition at Quantico. Time, 3 weeks from now. Audience, Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff." Her hands trembled. This was no longer an internal challenge. This was a national stage, where one bullet could etch her name into history or erase it in a single moment. Emily closed the laptop, leaned back, and shut her eyes. In her mind, she saw her grandfather standing under a wide sky, his eyes kind but resolute. The first shot can change a life. 3 weeks later, Virginia's sky was gray, draped in tension. The Quantico Range gleamed with fluttering flags, the stands packed with pristine uniforms adorned with medals, reflecting the faint sunlight. In the front row, the Secretary of Defense sat sternly beside the Joint Chiefs. This was no mere technical display, it was a national stage, where every shot could define a career and a legacy. Emily Carter emerged from the prep area, her uniform damp with sweat, but her eyes clear as a mountain stream. Before her stretched a long firing line, where 19 other shooters, SEALs, Delta, Rangers, Marines adjusted their rifles. They were veterans of battlefields, while she was just a young cadet. The gap was a chasm, but Emily refused to bow her head. The first round, 500 meters. 5 steel targets staggered at varying heights. The referee signaled, and gunfire thundered in unison. Emily lay down, steadying her breath. Her hands trembled briefly, but when her eye met the scope, the world narrowed to a single line. Ping, ping, ping. Each shot hit dead center. As the dust settled, the scoreboard flashed. She was among the top 3. A dream start, but only the first step. The second round, 1,000 meters. Clouds rolled in, light shifting constantly, wind unpredictable. Seasoned shooters hesitated, some shots missed. Emily pressed her cheek to the stock, the target blurring through heat mirage. She recalled those dark nights in range 12, listening to the wind and letting bullets fly with her heartbeat. She didn't fight nature but waited for it to settle. A fleeting calm emerged amid the chaotic gusts. She fired. Ping! The target fell. Her next shots hit center, not perfect but enough to hold her rank. By the end of round 2, Emily was in the top 5. The stands buzzed. A young cadet holding her own with battle-hardened snipers? Unthinkable. The third round, 1,200 meters, moving target. This was where the brutality showed. Targets appeared briefly, darting quickly, winds swirling erratically. Many veterans missed. The steel silent instead of ringing. Emily lay down, relaxing her shoulders, her eyes tracking the target like a dancer following music. She didn't count or calculate, she felt. Her finger touched the trigger, and the ping rang like a final note. The crowd gasped, generals exchanging looks of undisguised surprise. As round 3 closed, Emily made the top 5 finalists an undeniable position. The entire range held its breath. Her name, once doubted and mocked, now echoed loudly across Quantico. But her greatest rival was Senior Chief Cole West, a SEAL veteran with eyes sharp as blades. Throughout the rounds, West never faltered. He was a machine, cold and precise, each bullet destined for its mark. When he looked at Emily, he gave a slight nod, as if saying, "You're no longer an outsider. You're a real contender." The loudspeaker announced the final round, mixed shooting under artificial conditions, simulated rain, swirling winds, targets appearing and vanishing at varying speeds. This was no longer a shooting drill but a battlefield simulation. Emily stepped to the firing line, her heart pounding like a drum. Before her, the Secretary of Defense sat silent, his stern eyes tracking every move. In her mind, her grandfather's voice echoed, "The first shot can save a life, but a series of shots, that's a legacy." Artificial rain began pattering on the stand's roof, wind whipping flags, targets flickering through fog. Emily pressed her cheek to the stock, her finger tightening. This was no longer about winning or losing. This was the moment a bullet would decide if her name would be carved into history or fade into a forgotten file. The starting whistle tore through the heavy air. Instantly, high-powered fans roared, creating chaotic wind swirls. The water system sprayed waves of artificial rain, turning the range into an unnatural storm. Targets flickered in the manufactured fog, sometimes still, sometimes sliding like ghosts. At the firing line, Emily pressed her shoulder to the ground, the scent of wet grass and cold steel mingling in her nose. Fake rain streamed down her cheek, but she didn't care. Her world was now the trembling sightline in the swirling gusts. A shot fired, not hers, but the shooter beside her. The bullet veered off, missing the target, leaving only a dry clank. The crowd stirred softly, then fell silent, waiting. In this round, every mistake was exposed without mercy. Emily closed her eyes for a beat, finding her breath. She didn't try to control the storm before her. She listened to it. Each gust whistling past her ears, each heavy drop on her lashes, became the backdrop for the single moment she awaited. When the wind calmed, the rain paused, and the world touched a rare stillness. Her finger squeezed the trigger. Ping. The sound echoed, reverberating through the stands. The first target fell. The crowd erupted in applause, then hushed, not wanting to miss the next breath. The second shot. The third. Each bullet left the barrel like ink drops on wet paper. Not flawless, but enough to keep her in the lead. Her body shivered from the cold, but her eyes burned bright. Not far away, Senior Chief Cole West moved like a machine. Rain or wind, his bullets hit as if programmed. Each shot was a brutal reminder that Emily faced not just a man, but a living legend. With 3 minutes left, the range narrowed to 2 names, Carter and West. The crowd held its breath. The Secretary of Defense leaned forward, binoculars raised, as if he too were betting on this moment. The final target appeared. 1,200 meters. Sliding laterally. Wind shifting constantly. West aimed. Fired ping. Dead center. The crowd roared. Emily's turn. She lay flat, her finger trembling on the trigger. Wind shifted erratically. Rain stung her face. Everything seemed set to break her before she could fire. She closed her eyes briefly. Her grandfather's voice rising. Don't calculate when the storm rages. Wait for the world to hold its breath, then let the bullet go. Emily opened her eyes, peering through the scope. The wind softened for a heartbeat. She fired. Ping. The sound rang long, echoing across the stands. The target fell, slow but certain. The range exploded in thunderous applause. When the scoreboard lit up, the numbers glowed. Emily Carter second place, trailing West by just 0.4 points. Not absolute victory, but for a young cadet, standing before battle-hardened masters for the first time, it was undeniable proof. No one could call her first shot luck anymore. No one could say she was a fleeting name. Emily stood, her uniform drenched, eyes fixed on the stands. The Secretary of Defense rose, stepped down, and shook her hand. America needs this skill, he said, his voice low but clear enough for the back rows to hear. In the crowd, officers whispered among themselves. Some nodded, some frowned. But one thing was clear. Emily Carter was no longer just a cadet. She had become a symbol. In a distant corner, Major Kincaid stood with arms crossed, his eyes dark. He didn't clap or smile, but those eyes revealed one truth. The battle between him and Emily was far from over. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter roared, slicing through Quantico's gray sky. Emily sat inside, straps tight across her chest, her heart still pounding from the applause that hadn't yet faded. She thought she'd be flown back to Granite Ridge, closing the competition with a simple ceremony. But when the digital map lit up on the console, the route didn't point home. It stretched south, stopping at a name that made any soldier catch their breath. Fort Liberty, North Carolina. The rotor's hum blended with the whistling wind. Like a prelude to a storm, Emily gripped her dog tag, staring out the window. Below, endless forests stretched, rivers glinting silver. But the serene view hid a truth. Fort Liberty wasn't for dreamers. It was the nerve center of U.S. Special Forces, where the best were honed to their limits, and those not tough enough were left behind steel gates. The helicopter landed on a dusty runway. No welcoming party greeted her. Only a rugged man with a weathered uniform and a sun-scorched face. Master Sergeant Hawkins, a legend among combat snipers. He didn't shake hands, just nodded and said curtly, "Welcome to Combat Precision Advanced." Emily stepped down, her boots sinking into thick dust, instantly feeling the air was different here. No applause, no stands, no watchful eyes. Only the harsh silence of discipline and the cold stares of special operators who'd fought across the globe. The training group was just 10 strong. She recognized faces from Quantico, including Senior Chief Cole West, the rival who'd edged her out by less than half a point. He nodded slightly, his eyes no longer challenging but acknowledging. "We're here for one reason: no one's allowed to fail." The days that followed were hell. Training began before dawn and stretched past midnight. They shot from rooftops, from moving vehicle windows, from shaking helicopters. They learned to read wind not just by flags or grass, but by cigarette smoke, dust swirls, even the quiver of leaves hundreds of meters away. Emily was exhausted. Her hands bled from relentless trigger pulls in impossible positions. At night, her body ached, her breath burned, but a fire blazed within. Here, no one cared about gender, age, or rumors. Only hits or misses mattered. And she knew. To survive, Every bullet had to be a statement. In rare moments of rest, Emily opened her grandfather's worn leather notebook. Its cryptic symbols, formulas, and notes, once meaningless, came alive in this crucible. Integrate the variables, don't separate them, he'd written. She tried it. Instead of adding wind, subtracting humidity, or multiplying factors, she felt them as one, like a symphony, where each element was a note. The results stunned even her. Shots became faster, more accurate, more natural. Words spread in the group. They started calling it the Carter method. West, her fiercest rival, was the first to approach after a drill. "Show me that notebook." Emily hesitated, then shared it. Under the barracks' yellow light, battle-hardened operators pored over it, egos set aside, united by respect for knowledge. One night, after a drill in artificial rain, Hawkins summoned Emily to the command tent. He placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside were partially declassified documents, old photos, battlefield reports, and Samuel Carter's name bolded on every page. Emily trembled seeing her grandfather, young, standing among elite units, his eyes blazing like hers in the mirror each morning. "Your grandfather wasn't just a shooter," Hawkins said, his voice low. "He laid the foundation for modern sniper doctrine. And now, the world wants to see if you can carry it forward." Emily sat still, emotions flooding her. All she'd thought was to prove one shot wasn't luck. Now she understood. The path ahead wasn't just about proving herself, it was about carrying a legacy. A legacy under the world's scrutiny. Outside, the night wind whispered through the pines. Emily touched her dog tag, feeling its cold metal as a reminder. The real battle was just beginning. Night fell over Fort Liberty, heavy as a dark blanket. In the barrack, dim yellow light bathed the exhausted faces of 10 people pushed to their physical limits. On the old wooden table, cold rations sat half-eaten. No one spoke much. Only bloodshot eyes and calloused, trembling hands told the story. Emily sat in a corner, opening her grandfather's tattered leather notebook. Its yellowed pages smelled of old paper and gunpowder, like a breath from the past. She traced cryptic symbols, arrows, wind lines, stacked numbers. As a child, she'd thought he was just doodling. Now, in this harsh setting, each stroke glowed like a master's code. One passage, scribbled hastily, stood out. "Don't add or subtract wind and distance. Don't pull them apart. Feel them all at once like hearing a multi-part symphony, each sound blending into a chord." His words echoed in her memory. Emily closed her eyes, imagining the battlefield not as scattered numbers but a living symphony. Wind whistling, light shifting, humidity heavy, all became instruments playing together. The shooter wasn't a calculator but a conductor. The next day, in a drill shooting from a rooftop at a 900-meter target, Emily applied the method. She didn't strain over each variable but let her body listen. When the wind shifted, she adjusted the barrel lightly, like tuning an instrument. When light flared, she waited for a pause, like a rest in music. The shot fired, piercing the chaotic air, and hit dead center. Her teammates below stood silent for a moment, then whistled. West, who'd bested her at Quantico, squinted long, then approached. "Show me that notebook." That evening, in the barrack, Emily spread the notebook on the table. West, Reed from Delta, and others gathered around. Under the flickering yellow light, seasoned operators studied each symbol, scribbling notes in haste. No more arrogance. They listened like fresh cadets. Emily didn't read everything. She explained how to feel the variables as a unified system. When the wind shifts, it's not a number to add, it's a new beat. When light changes, it's not a problem, it's the bass line of the song. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes shone. The barrack fell silent. Men who'd survived Fallujah, Helmand, Kandahar sat scribbling a 2-3-year-old cadet's words. In that moment, Emily realized her grandfather's notebook wasn't just a family heirloom. It was an untapped, tactical treasure. The days after, the Carter method spread like wildfire. In drills, Emily was no longer the one proving herself, but the one consulted. Reed, usually quiet, said one evening, "Your way cut 3 seconds off my shot. 3 seconds in combat can save a squad." Cole West, once her rival, became an ally. He stood beside her, comparing how to apply the method in each scenario. From those exchanges, mutual respect grew. One afternoon, after a drill, Hawkins called Emily to his tent office. On the table lay a thick file stamped, "Declassified." Inside were old photos. Samuel Carter among SEALs in Southeast Asia, eyes blazing, a custom rifle in hand. Reports detailed his missions, shots that saved comrades in desperate moments. Hawkins said, voice low, "Your grandfather wasn't just a shooter. He laid the foundation for modern sniper doctrine. And now, what he wrote is coming alive through you." Emily held the photo, her heart swelling. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. Each bullet she fired now carried not just her name, but a generation's memory. That night, as wind rustled the pines, Emily sat outside the barrack, notebook in hand, staring at a star-filled sky. She whispered as if to her grandfather, "I won't let it stay on paper. I'll make it the world's heartbeat." Dawn bled across Fort Liberty's sky like faint ink. No alarm sounded, but the barrack sprang awake before light. Today was the final test of the training phase, a challenge bluntly called the grinder. Range 9 stretched before them like a torn battlefield. Fierce winds roared, high-powered fans creating artificial swirls that whipped up blinding dust. Targets ranged from 400 to 2,000 meters, some static, some moving, some flashing briefly before vanishing. Light was manipulated, blazing bright, then dim as dusk. This wasn't a shooting drill, but a chaotic symphony designed to crush even veteran snipers. Emily took her position, her uniform damp with cold sweat despite the early hour. Beside her, Cole West was ready, his face calm as stone. Observers, generals, trainers, cold-eyed evaluating officers watched. No media cameras were here. Everything unfolded in classified silence, where a mistake meant permanent erasure. The starting whistle sounded. First shot, a 500-meter target, visible for 3 seconds. Emily exhaled, fired. Ping. The steel sang. She didn't check the scoreboard, shifting her rifle left. Second shot. 900 meters. Crosswind swirling. She didn't add or subtract but felt the chaos. The barrel adjusted slightly. The bullet flew through the dust storm. Ping. Another dead center hit. Her heartbeat merged with the shots. Targets appeared, vanished, re-emerged from shadows. Emily moved like a dancer, the rifle an instrument. Each shot was a note, weaving into a melody. Outside, murmurs grew. Trainers scribbled furiously. An old general squinted, nodding. Emily didn't see. For her, only her grandfather's music remained. With 3 minutes left, the final target appeared. 2,000 meters, flickering in blurred artificial light. Winds shifted constantly, dust swirling in white streaks. This was the deciding shot. Emily breathed deeply, closing her eyes for a beat. Her grandfather's voice rose. "Don't calculate when the world's in chaos. Find the moment it holds its breath, then let the bullet go." She opened her eyes. Amid the chaos, she saw a fleeting gap where wind and light aligned. She fired. Ping. The sound rang long, echoing across the range. The target fell. Silence gripped the field. Then the scoreboard lit up, red numbers blazing. Emily Carter, 97.8 points. A new program record. The barrack erupted in cheers. West smiled, tapping her shoulder, his nod carrying respect untainted by pride. But Emily didn't smile. She sat up, breathing heavily, staring into the void. Her heart raced, not from victory but from the truth, dawning. She'd stepped into a place with no turning back. From the stands, General Harper stood, eyes gleaming. He spoke briefly with Hawkins, then nodded. Carter didn't just break a record. She's proving Samuel Carter's doctrine still lives. Another officer muttered. If the world knew we're training a second Ivory Quill, it'd be an uproar. Emily didn't hear those words, but she felt the invisible weight on her shoulders. This record wasn't just personal triumph. It was a challenge to the system, a reminder that a legacy never dies. And now, all eyes waited to see if she could bear that light or be consumed by it. She gripped her dog tag, looking at the gray sky breaking into sunlight. A new chapter of her life had begun, but in that bright glow, shadows were already creeping toward her. A week after the historic Range 9 record, Emily was summoned to Fort Liberty's strategy briefing room. The room was cold, its concrete walls lit by pale blue screens. No noise, only the faint smell of printer paper and gunpowder lingering in the air. Around the table sat faces Emily had only seen in news photos or on screens. Generals from the Army, Air Force, Marines, and officers from Joint Special Operations. Each carried a distinct presence, some cold, some sharp, some with eyes weary from too many wars. But all turned to her, a young cadet, still wearing her cadet insignia, now the center of attention. General Harper stood, placing a thick file on the table, stamped declassified. He opened it slowly, revealing yellowed pages, old photos from Vietnam and covert Southeast Asian missions. In each image, a familiar face appeared: Samuel Carter, Emily's grandfather. Her heart clenched. She saw him, far younger than her memories, standing among SEALs, his uniform faded, a custom rifle on his shoulder, eyes blazing with unshakable conviction. Another photo showed him in a jungle, eye to the scope. Comrades crouched under enemy fire. Harper spoke, his voice like metal scraping stone. Samuel Carter wasn't just a legendary sniper. He laid the foundation for America's modern sniper doctrine. The notes in the book you hold, they're the missing piece of our classified records. And you, Emily, have proven that method isn't just theory. It lives. It breathes. It shoots. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. An admiral cleared his throat, his eyes cold. If we go public with this, we'd have to admit that for decades, the military overlooked a doctrine that could have changed outcomes. Carter will become a symbol, but also a thorn in many sides. An Air Force general laced his fingers, speaking softly but sharply. The issue isn't her talent. The issue is she's too young. Can we let a cadet become the face of a national doctrine? Emily sat still, hands clenched on her lap. She didn't speak, but her chest pounded like a drum. This wasn't pride anymore. It was weight, a shadow too vast, both shielding and threatening to crush her. Suddenly, the back door opened. Major Kincaid stepped in. The room turned to him, the man who'd openly opposed Emily. His face weathered, eyes deep. He set his cap on the table, looked straight at Emily, then to the council. I once thought Carter was just a lucky cadet, Kincaid said, his voice slow but firm. I was wrong. I saw her shoot through 5 rifles in conditions no one thought possible, and I watched her turn chaos into music. He paused, taking a deep breath. If Samuel Carter once saved my life on the battlefield, today Emily Carter has restored my faith in the new generation. The room fell silent. Doubting eyes wavered, as if Kincaid had ended a debate no one wanted to prolong. Harper nodded, turning to Emily. Carter, you're no longer just a cadet. We want you in a special unit, Advanced Sniper Doctrine Unit, to develop new sniper doctrine for the U.S. military. This will be announced after you pin on your lieutenant bars. You won't just carry the Carter name. You'll carry the legacy. Emily listened, her heart heavy as stone. This wasn't a reward, it was a sweet sentence. She was given glory, thousands coveted, but in exchange came scrutiny, envy, and pressures no cadet had ever borne. That night, as the base sank into silence, Emily sat alone on an abandoned range. She set her grandfather's leather notebook on her lap, opening to the final page. A single line, written in faded ink. A perfect shot doesn't just kill an enemy. It can save a nation. Emily stared at the words, tears silently falling onto the yellowed paper. She whispered, "Grandpa, I'm scared." But then she gripped the dog tag, feeling its cold metal against her skin. A reminder. Fear wasn't the enemy, giving up was. The night sky was blanketed with stars. Emily took a deep breath, looking up. She knew from this moment, there was no turning back. Night draped Fort Liberty like a heavy curtain. The barrack lights were out, but in the field classroom, pale yellow neon cast shadows on faces gathered around a wooden table. Emily stood at a whiteboard, marker in hand, her grandfather's worn notebook open before her. No longer the quiet cadet in the corner. Tonight she was the leader. Cole West sat with arms crossed, eyes focused. Reed from Delta leaned forward, scribbling notes. Even Hawkins stood at the back, arms crossed, watching like it was a rare lecture. The air was thick, like a tactics class, but different. The teacher was a 2-3-year-old cadet, the students battle-scarred operators. Emily drew a curve on the board, adding wind and light symbols. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. We're taught to calculate wind, distance, humidity, separately. But my grandfather believed that's why shots go astray. In combat, there's no perfect data, only moments. He called it the rule of the first shot. When you release the bullet, you let all variables blend into one feeling. No adding, no subtracting. Feel. The room was silent. West nodded slightly, eyes glinting with agreement. Reed, usually terse, muttered, "Trained intuition, not chance." Emily flipped through the notebook. A spiral for shifting wind. A slash for humidity. Numbers as reminders, not rigid formulas. He called it reading the terrain's rhythm. When the wind stills, it's a rest. When light shifts, it's the bass line. The best shooter isn't the best calculator, but the one who hears the battlefield's song. Hawkins, rarely showing emotion, finally spoke, and that's why Carter broke Range 9's record. He looked around, nodding. I doubted her. Now I believe this isn't random. It's doctrine. No one in the room argued. Men who'd survived Fallujah, Helmand, Kandahar sat silently, absorbing a young woman's words. That silence wasn't doubt, it was recognition. After the session, as others dispersed, Hawkins stayed. He set a small, dust-covered wooden box on the table. Emily opened it, hands trembling. Inside was a silver metal badge, etched with a white quill, the ivory quill emblem. Mitchell, former DevGru commander, kept it until today, Hawkins said, voice low and slow. He said it belongs to the worthy heir, and I believe that's you. Emily held the badge, its cold weight like a stone on her chest. She recalled childhood days, her grandfather's kind smile as he handed her an old rifle, saying, "One day, you'll understand." Now she did. But that understanding carried an immense burden. She pressed the badge into her palm, tears falling but a trembling smile forming. "I'm not sure I'm ready." Hawkins placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing lightly. "No one ever is, Carter. But your grandfather didn't leave this badge to sit in a box. He left it to live on." That night, in the darkened barrack, Emily lay in bed, clutching the badge. In the dark, the cold metal radiated strange warmth. It was no longer just her grandfather's symbol. It was a pact between past and present. Outside, wind roared through the pines. Emily closed her eyes, listening to it like an endless soundtrack. For the first time, she felt the legacy wasn't a haunting shadow. It was becoming her heartbeat. The iron gates of Granite Ridge loomed through red dust, as proud as the day Emily first crossed them. But this time, her steps didn't falter. In her pocket, the small ivory quill badge lay hidden, and in her heart, a smoldering fire burned, the weight of a legacy. The base hadn't changed. Barracks stood in neat rows, the range still baked in sun and dust. But the way people looked at Emily had shifted. As she passed the mess hall, heads nodded slightly, hands raised in salute. The cold silence that once surrounded her had dissolved, replaced by wordless recognition. Cadet Nico Ramirez, her rare ally, ran up with a beaming smile. "The star's back." His tone was half joking, half sincere, but his eyes shone with pride. Emily smiled, a relieved but humble smile. She knew today's looks weren't just for her, they saw Samuel Carter's shadow through her. The first day back, Colonel Shaw called her to his office. He placed a thick file on the desk, titled Proposed Training Module, Adaptive Sniping. "The Council wants you to test a new training program for first-year cadets. You're not just living proof. You'll have to turn the method into a curriculum." Emily flipped through the file, scanning dry theoretical pages. In her mind, she saw dark nights at Range 12. Her grandfather's scrawled symbols, his whispered words, "Don't teach them to shoot. Teach them to hear the wind." The next day, on the range, Emily stood before a line of new cadets. Their young faces mixed curiosity with skepticism, just like the looks she'd once endured. But this time, she didn't tremble. "You won't learn formulas," Emily said, her voice ringing under the Sunday. "You'll learn to read the battlefield's breath. When the wind shifts, don't add or subtract. Hear it as a beat. When light changes, don't fear it. See it as the bass line. A shot isn't just math. It's a song." At first, a few cadets chuckled softly. But when Emily lay down, raised the M2010, and in one breath sent a bullet through swirling wind to hit dead center, the ping silenced the range. Skeptical eyes turned to surprise, then silent respect. Days passed, and Emily's training module became a small legend at the base. Cadets whispered about the Carter method, sharing how to hear the wind, instead of staring at data tables. Ramirez, now a training assistant, stood by her side, proud as a true teammate. But Emily knew not everyone was pleased. One afternoon, as she coached a shooting group, Major Kincaid's gaze appeared at the range's edge. He stood with arms crossed, face cold, watching without a word. For a moment, Emily felt like she was back at day one. This man was a shadow that never faded. As the session ended, Kincaid approached. No growl, no scorn. He looked at her long, then gave a single nod and walked away. That small gesture, to Emily, weighed more than 1,000 words. That night, she sat alone in the memorial garden. The cool night breeze rustled the leaves like a whisper. Emily pulled the ivory quill badge from her pocket, placing it in her palm. Under the moonlight, the silver gleamed. She touched her grandfather's dog tag, whispering, "Grandpa, I'm back where it started. But this time, I'm not the outsider anymore." The wind carried the scent of pine. Emily closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She stood between two worlds, youthful passion on one side, a heavy legacy on the other. And now, they were one. That afternoon, Granite Ridge glowed with golden sunlight. A thin sheen draped over the range. Emily had just finished training the first-year cadets when a brief message arrived. "West Wing Briefing Room, 1900. Special guest." On time, she entered the small room in the base's old West Wing. No council, no familiar officers. Sitting there, on a simple wooden chair, was an elderly man, hair silver as ash, his uniform stripped of rank, only a faded badge remaining. "Cadet Carter?" His voice was low and raspy but carried unmistakable authority. Emily stood tall, saluting. "Sir." He smiled faintly, his eyes kind but deep. "I'm no sir anymore. Just an old man who stood on a ship's deck in a storm. My name's Admiral Mitchell. Samuel Carter was my teammate." The name stunned Emily. This was the man Hawkins mentioned, the keeper of the ivory quill badge, until a worthy successor was found. Mitchell studied her long, then pulled an old photo from his pocket. Black and white, blurred by time, it showed young soldiers in a Southeast Asian rainforest. In the center was Samuel Carter, rifle in hand, eyes piercing, a faint but radiant smile. "Your grandfather saved my life with one bullet," Mitchell said, voice low. We were surrounded, and only he found a gap in the chaos. One bullet, not to kill, to clear a path for us to live. Emily gripped the dog tag in her pocket, her throat tightening. Mitchell continued, "People think snipers are killers. But Samuel knew better than anyone a shot can be truth. It proves the enemy isn't invisible. Proves comrades still have hope. Sometimes, it's not about taking a life but giving meaning to many." He looked straight at Emily, his aged eyes blazing. "You broke records. You turned numbers into music. But remember, skill doesn't save a nation. Truth does. And sometimes, truth must be fired from a barrel." Emily's eyes blurred. She saw it all. The rumors, the challenges, Kincaid's stare, West's respect, the cold ivory quill in her hand. It all led to this moment when she realized her journey wasn't just skill but carrying truth. Mitchell stood, his steps slow but steady. He placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "Don't shoot to prove you're better. Don't shoot to please the council. Shoot for the truth you believe in. Only then will your bullet carry the Carter name." His words cut like a blade but soothed like cool water. Emily bowed deeply, tears unhidden. "I'll remember, Admiral." Mitchell smiled, walking out into the twilight, his figure fading like a ghost from the past. But his words echoed in the small room. That night, Emily returned to the memorial garden, sitting before a stone etched with fallen soldiers' names. She placed the ivory quill badge beside her grandfather's dog tag. 2 pieces of metal, one from the past, one from the present, gleamed under the moonlight. She whispered, "Grandpa, I understand now. A shot isn't just to prove. It must carry truth. And I'll shoot that way." The night wind rustled the pines, like a reply from the departed. Emily closed her eyes, breathing deeply. In her chest the old fear was gone. Only a quiet resolve remained, steady as steel. Night cloaked the Middle Eastern border. A crescent moon hung low, silver light piercing dusty clouds. Emily lay flat on an abandoned building's roof, her Barrett M107A1 steady on her shoulder. The scope framed a target nearly 2,000 meters away. A small house where, per intel, a terrorist leader was hiding. Through her earpiece, the commander's voice was cold. "Carter, this is your one chance. When the target steps out, shoot. No hesitation." Emily breathed deeply, eyes glued to the scope. But then, the wooden door swung open. Not an armed man, but a child, no older than 10, stepping out curiously. Emily froze, her heart pounded. In a flash, Admiral Mitchell's words echoed, "Don't shoot to please the council. Shoot for the truth you believe in." The real target appeared behind the child, the man from the file. But he carried no weapon, only placed a hand on the child's shoulder, gently guiding them back inside. Through the scope, Emily saw something unexpected. He wasn't fleeing or rushing. For a moment, he was just a man, his eyes betraying fatigue. The commander's voice barked in her ear. "Shoot, Carter, shoot!" Emily's finger tightened on the trigger. But memories flooded in. Mornings with her grandfather listening to the wind, the scrawled notebook, nights at Fort Liberty turning chaos into music. And Mitchell's words, "A shot can save a nation." But save how? By killing another name on a list? Or by choosing truth even against orders? Emily eased her finger. The bullet stayed in the chamber. On the other end, shouts erupted. "Carter, you missed the target." The man stepped back inside, the door closing. The mission was a failure. The team withdrew in tension. On the helicopter back to base, no one spoke. Only the engine's roar drowned out all sound. Emily sat silent, eyes on the dark ground below, clutching her dog tag. She knew she'd broken a cardinal rule. The order. When the chopper landed, she was taken straight to an interrogation room. Blinding white light poured down, senior officers surrounding her. A general slammed the table, furious. "Do you realize you just threw away a golden opportunity? Do you know the consequences? Emily looked up, eyes dry. I know. But if I'd shot, I'd have killed a child. And that's not the truth I believe in. The room fell silent. Officers exchanged complex looks. No one expected this young cadet to face the system head-on. General Harper entered, silent for a long moment, then said, Carter, you've just made yourself a bigger target than any bullet. That night, back in the barrack, Emily set the ivory quill badge and her grandfather's dog tag side by side on the table. She sat long, listening to the wind outside. There was no regret, only fear and faith. She knew she'd chosen the hardest path. From now on, every bullet she fired would be scrutinized not just by enemies but by the system itself. But that was the truth she chose, and she'd see it through. The night sky was still. Emily closed her eyes, whispering, Grandpa, I didn't shoot, but I heard the truth. Granite Ridge has acknowledged her. Fort Liberty has etched her name into the records. But the real test in the field is where Emily Carter truly reveals herself. She refuses to pull the trigger. And in a single night, from a symbol, Emily becomes a giant question mark in the eyes of the system. No one denies her talent. But in the military, talent isn't enough. What they demand is obedience to orders. Emily committed the unforgivable. She chose conscience over rank. This story doesn't end in glory but in a chasm. Will Emily face discipline, expulsion, or quiet support to become a political pawn? In the shadows, powerful hands are deliberating, while Emily sits in silence, clutching her dog tag and ivory quill insignia. And the most haunting question is this. If part 1 ends with her refusing to shoot, could part 2 begin with her being forced to fire, but this time, who will the bullet be aimed at?